Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. What happens when you get diagnosed with autism and then been told that you also have PDA and you're also raising $3 on your own? Well, that's what happened with my next guest. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and I'll see you on the other side. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's
I'm
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Danielle Jata-Hall. Welcome to the show, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Um, okay, so I'm Danielle. I'm a single parent to three children with complex needs. Um, all three of my children are autistic, and with varying presentations of a PDA profile, which I'll come on to a little bit later. I'm also autistic and ADHD myself, and it was brought up that I possibly was PDA as well. So that's something we'll come on to. I'm a blogger, so I write a blog called PDA Parenting. I'm an author of a children's book and an adult's book on PDA, and again, I'll talk about those a bit later. A bit of background about me: I've worked in education, so I worked in primary and secondary education as a teaching assistant, but I was always drawn to children with special educational needs. I just had a radar for children that kind of were being a bit misunderstood, and I sort of naturally had a way of building with them, which I now understand to be the fact that I was neurodivergent myself and that I was drawn to a child struggling, that I kind of probably felt quite in tune with that. I've studied I've studied actually my background is studying drama and acting. That would be my kind of field that I did before that, but that's kind of narrowly changed because of the kind of lifestyle that I have with my children, because now I'm a full-time carer to them. So I've kind of adapted what I'm interested in, and I've kind of gone down a completely different road of really throwing myself in deep into finding out about PDA, autism, ADHD, and supporting parents. So I also did run a support group for parents to try and help them. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So when did you get diagnosed with ASD?
Not that long ago, actually. It was this year.
So you're
I
near, so you're newly diagnosed.
Yeah, only maybe March time, I think, was the autism part. And then ADHD came about, I think, about by the summer, confirmed. So I'm in my 40s, so quite late, really, to find out.
So when you got diagnosed, did you feel like a cover was lifted off your eyes and things started making sense to you at that point?
Yeah, I think it's given me some clarity on who I am as a person. Because if I talk to my parents about what I was like as a young person, I would always be like, I always wore my like I'd always have like a moral badge thing on my sleeve, almost like I was driven by any sense of injustice, and it used to get me in a lot of trouble, really. I used to be notorious for fighting as a kid. I'd continuously be in fisticuffs with everybody. And that kind of brought a lot of shame on me as a child, that in a misunderstood way, because I was always, was I always bringing trouble? Was I looking for trouble? Was I fighting everybody? And actually, inside, there was a communication difference that I couldn't express myself in a certain way. And, I'd always be calling out things that were what I felt were not correct. So I would often be following kind of quite strict rules and stuff. So, and the rules that applied to me, I probably had a lack of understanding about hierarchy as well. So I would always see everyone as quite, we should all be met level as a child. For me as a child, and not seeing an adult in that position. And then as a teenager, I just learned to people please and go under the radar and avoid anything, to not be seen, to not be that same person I was as a child. And I think there was a sense of shame probably that has come through from that. So it's taken a lot to unpick that and think. I remember in the assessments, I think on the ADHD side, the consultant had said to me, you learn very early as a child that it wasn't safe to be you. And I think that might resonate with a lot of other people, that we kind of learn to hide and camouflage ourselves, don't we? So that we can stay hidden really and not stand out, because we are slightly different at different times. So so it has brought clarity to who I am. And I think I felt like an imposter for quite a long time, because having 3 children with varying degrees of presentations, I always felt like, oh, is it me? Maybe they get it from me, because I already know, I feel strongly that their dad was undiagnosed. And he actually did say that to me himself once we started looking at assessments and stuff. He kind of accepted that possibly came from him. But it was not too far from me as well. So it was nice to actually have some understanding, and also to speak to the children and be like, it's not a bad thing. We're the same. It's not an other thing or a disorder. We are the same. We just think differently.
Now,
So,
when were your kids diagnosed?
or sorry, there's a little cup of tea for this one. Um, my eldest started showing signs when she was sort of maybe about 4 or so. Well, younger than that, but at around 4, life became very challenging for her, and it coincided with the time that she started school. So she was about 5 when she got diagnosed, which is quite unusual for girls, because usually we are quite late on the radar, but she could not manage school. So it became quite obvious that there was something else we were seeing. So she was 5, and that was in 2016. And then next to follow was the 2 younger children. The youngest one I spotted straight away, because she was resembling a lot of how the older daughter was. So I was starting to see, but that was pushed away. I kind of got all services involved, and we were starting to look at this. And then because she also masked in when she started school, nobody believed me. So those services were pushed away. And it took a long fight to kind of bring everything back. So she was about 6, I think, when she got her autism with PDA diagnosis. And we're still waiting for ADHD, because that keeps getting pushed back because people don't see it in her. And then my middle daughter, she was diagnosed about a year or 2 ago, not too long ago. And she probably was about 9 or 10 when she got diagnosed. And that was because she masked so heavily that nobody kind of saw any of her differences. And she just hit burnout basically, and was unable to do anything. She wasn't able to attend school. And that's when things started to unravel for the full assessment. So in terms of, for girls, they've kind of been diagnosed early because the struggles with school were so apparent. And because one was diagnosed, we started to see similarities. I think the younger 2 might have gone through a lot of an older age, much like I did, before we would have ever noticed that perhaps something was there, possibly. I don't know if that's something you see quite often as well from a lot of your guests that you speak to.
Yeah, a lot of guests, when they look at their kids who've been diagnosed, they kind of all of a sudden realize that, they have a lot of the traits they have, and then they're like, maybe I should get tested. And then they
Yeah,
wind up getting tested, and then it's, wow, I'm autistic too.
yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like a mirror. You're looking at your kids and you're seeing all these traits that you have, but you didn't know why you have them. And then when your kid gets tested and the therapist looks up and says, I see a lot of it in you. You should get tested. And then the parent gets tested and it turns out
Mhm.
they're autistic as well. And it's like an eye opener for the parent, because all these years, either they've been masking or they're unsure of why they are the way they are.
Yeah, yeah. And then we add another layer on this with the PDA profile, because there's a real lack of understanding about what that is, how it still relates to the fact that the individual is autistic and they still meet that autism diagnosis underneath. And actually it's almost like an overlay that is an extra layer to that. And and I know in my own assessment, they found it very hard to start unpicking it, because they said sometimes we were almost seeing something that could be autistic, sometimes ADHD, and where it was really difficult down the middle was your ability that it's likely that you were PDA profile, or even though they weren't going to diagnose that, but they said, and that confounded us even more because it covered a lot of it in the way that I answered questions and dealt with things. So and if you take that to a child and how they display, often it really confuses people, because on the surface we can seem really masterful at mirroring language and communication styles and doing everything on the surface that other people are doing, but underneath we're still lacking some understanding with some of those social situations and stuff.
That's the thing I get a lot at with my guests is because of the fact that ADHD and ASD mirror each other almost, it's
Yeah.
hard to diagnose one over the other until you start diving deeper into each of the traits and each of the symptoms and the way the person acts. And then that's when you
Yeah.
start to find out that person has PDA because the way the
Mm-hmm.
questions are answered. Because a lot of people have noticed that people get misdiagnosed because
Oh, yeah.
because ADHD and ASD are have almost the same symptoms. It's hard. I have a
Mm-hmm.
good friend who I know deep down he's autistic. He's gotten tested and the doctor said, "No, you're not autistic, but you have ADHD." And I'm like, "Well, I don't believe him. You are autistic. You have so many traits of autism."
Mm-hmm.
And it may not show on testing, but I see it because I see it in myself.
Yeah.
You are autistic, and that's why we make good friends.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of know, don't we? We start to look at our friendship groups and our family circles and stuff, and we start to notice you know, a common theme, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you try to tell your parents because they don't realize that it's hereditary. And then you see all these traits in your parents, and you're like, "Do you realize you're autistic?" And you're like, "No, I'm not." I'm like, "Well,
Yeah,
I see all these traits that you do in
yeah,
myself."
yeah.
And then they
And,
just say, "No, no, no."
and they've been socially conditioned into a complete new way of thinking as well, and
Mhm.
with old traditions and stuff, and the way they've been brought up, things become so complicated to unpick, don't they? It's really, really tricky. Although in my family, my parents have kind of, I mean, we joke that they are, or it doesn't come far, or the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And in some ways, we joke about it, but they sort of, I don't know, they don't have the desire to go and find it out, and it doesn't affect them necessarily to get on with day-to-day living of what they're doing. So why would they need any, and they don't really have the need for clarity. And I think it's different if you do. Like for me, I did. I don't know about yourself, whether you felt like you kind of wanted to
Well,
know.
my story was a little bit different. We didn't know I was autistic until my late 20s when we had a couple of family members who were psychologists and psychiatrists,
Hmm.
my family doctor and a family lawyer who worked with families said to my parents that I exhibit all the signs of high functioning.
Hmm.
And that's when a light bulb went off in my parents' head, and that like this explains why he acts the way he does, why he does certain things, why he
Hmm.
has no filter. And for me, it kind of became, like you said, like a clarity of why I am the way I am.
Hmm.
And it's something I'm glad I found out about. Otherwise, I would have gone through life wondering why I act the way I do, why I'm different from all my other friends, why it takes me longer to understand a school assignment when other kids, they can just breeze right through their work.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember a time where I was in my history class and we were supposed to be taking notes from a movie, and I could not grasp what what was important to write down from these movies about history to write down as notes. I had to
It's too
literally,
broad, isn't it? The question already is too broad. Like you need to know specifically what you're supposed to be doing. Do you know what I mean? The language around that can be so
yeah, because all
on
I
point.
remember was the teacher saying, "I want you to take notes from this film," and I'm like, uh, okay. And I'm sitting there with my notebook open and I'm trying to take notes, and it's hard when you're like, what's important, what's not important, and so forth, to a point where I had to borrow my notes from a friend.
Hmm. Because it's too vague.
Yeah.
Too doesn't make sense. And to find that out afterwards, oh, like you can see the reasonable adjustments. You can see the kind of way that you might have needed that framed for you to be able to do it. And yet you can feel a sense of frustration and disappointment in yourself because you can't do something which you could do if you had the tools to do it, right?
I mean, what's interesting about me with high school was back then I never knew I was autistic.
Hmm.
I went through high school not knowing what was wrong. I was pretty much masking because I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't.
Hmm.
And I didn't know I was masking until later in life when I learned about what masking was.
Hmm.
I was picked on at high school. Fortunately, my older brother had just graduated 2 years ahead of me, so the upper class knew who I was to look out for me, but I still got picked on.
Yeah.
But for me, school was harder. Everyone else was able to get their assignments done. For me, it took longer.
Hmm. For me, I had like, this is where I can start to pull the PDA element to it because I could perhaps understand the task. Maybe it would take me a little bit longer to process it, but I would probably understand what I would be asked. Or I would write down whatever the homework was, or say whatever task we've got to do afterwards, whatever. And I just could not do it unless there was the deadline there. And it used to frustrate me because I would never be able to do anything. So, I could leave I would never be able to schedule myself for the whole week. And I knew, and it would build this demand of trying to do something. And it was something I was quite capable of. And I actually enjoyed doing the work once I started, but I
Hmm.
could never physically start. And once I started, so it would leave to the last night before, and I still couldn't start it. Then I'd get myself in a panic and I couldn't start. And I'd get frustrated with myself, like, why can't you just do this piece of work? Why can't you be like other people that just do it? Even set yourself a time that you do it after school, and then you've got the rest of the evening to chill out. I couldn't. I dread every night, hated it. And then I would still not do it that night. I'd get myself in such a big fret, and then I would have to set the alarm and probably set myself alarm at 4 o'clock in the morning with that deadline that I'd have to do it before I've left before I'm up at 7 in the morning. I'd have 3 hours to get through all of the homework that I'd never done. And once I time, then I'd go to school extremely tired, drop all the homework in, and then I'd think to myself, next time I'm not going to put myself under that pressure, just get on with it. And I'd come with more homework and I could never do any of it. It just frustrated me all of the time. But because I was highly able to just manage through, and I was academic enough to do it, people would never have known that I was struggling.
I mean, that kind of reminds me when I was in school, when I was in not high school, but when I was going for my master's, I would sit in front, I would record the lectures,
Mhm.
but yet I can never get myself to listen to them. I couldn't absorb all
Yeah.
the information. So when it came time for the exam, and even with taking with unlimited on time testing in the special room of a proctor,
Mhm.
my biggest problem was, and this stems all the way from high school, is I have an issue where if I'm sitting in a room with with an on-time test, no matter what it is, if I see another person finish before me, I go into panic mode. My mind is like, I don't want to be the last person here. My mind doesn't think, wait a minute. He's not taking the same test you're taking. You
Hmm.
probably got a bunch of other people taking different tests than
Hmm.
you are from different courses. My mind
Hmm.
doesn't think that. My mind thinks, I don't want to be the last person here.
Hmm.
And I greedily rush for my test, hand it in, get out of there in a panic.
Mm. And that whole exam thing just plays havoc with us because it never
Mhm.
shows the ability that we could possibly have to absorb information. We could probably learn things, like the lecture thing, like you're saying, you could be in something not able to absorb it. And probably this is
Mhm.
where we go to ADHD, but we can't absorb it. But yet we've got higher level of and capacity to think in complex ways.
Yeah.
Yet in that moment we can't take it in. And I find the same thing with exams never really reflected on. I mean, I did well, but I could never do like, I always did better if I could do coursework or something where I could show my flair into something. And I can just imagine, I can just remember like exams, dreading it, and how much I avoided everything. Like subjects I liked, particularly like say art and PE, I avoided taking those subjects and refused. And now when I look back, I think, God, why did I stop doing those? I really enjoyed them. That's madness. Why did I do that? And it was because I knew there'd be 2 days exams on those, and the thought of them sent me into a panic. So I'd avoid the subjects I actually liked just out of the fear of what was
Hmm.
coming. And I think this is where that avoidance to everything, not being able to start something, becomes so overwhelming that we can't always live to our full potential at times without those support aids or adjustments in place. I
So
don't know.
when you found out you had PDA, I mean, did that kind of answer a lot of things for you?
Yeah, massively. Um, Perhaps my vulnerabilities in trusting people too quickly, I think. I feel like I remember that my mum was, because the we had to have like somebody who knew you, were like, or your parent or whatever, filling out part of the assessment of what they felt about you. And
I
we were
remember that.
yeah, we were both at loggerheads because I said, "Oh, I'm really good at reading people's emotions or what their intent was, and and all of that kind of stuff." And on hers, it was completely contradicted, and it was, that I was incredibly vulnerable, that I didn't read people's intentions. I kind of put everybody at trust at face value and trust them and see the good in people all the time, and I'm not seeing any of the intent that people have. So when they kind of, at the end of the assessment, they come to us and said, well, we've got really conflicted views here. You've said this and your mum said that, which one's right? And it felt very uncomfortable for me to actually have to admit that possibly she's right, because in my mind I'm doing everything okay. There's nothing wrong with me here. I'm
Mhm.
fine. But when I'm listening it to for someone else's perspective, I realize that it is there. So definitely, I think as well, I get frustrated with myself, and I'm still coming to terms with this. There are days when for whatever reason, whatever happens, I feel like I'm not achieving anything. I feel like I should be doing so much more than what I am doing, and I want to do it, or I want to go out somewhere if someone invites me somewhere. But when it comes to it, I'll say yes at the time, and I could spend all week fearing it to the point that I'm that crippled with anxiety about actually going. And more often than not, if I'm forced to actually go out and do it, I really enjoy myself, and then it's harder for me to even come away from it. So it's
Oh,
like
wow.
I'm all dreading everything. And I don't know why I dread everything, because once I start, I'm fine. It's the fear of starting. And
Oh
I
my
think
God.
trying to give myself that understanding.
Oh my God. That's exactly me. You described everything that happens with me.
Yeah.
Anytime going anywhere new, I get
Hmm.
I get so much anxiety built up
Yeah.
that I just cancel out of going.
Hmm.
My mom is the one who'll sit there and go, just go. But when you get there, you'll have a good time.
Yeah.
Kent, my college had a alumni reunion here in the US.
Hmm.
from people from different years that have graduated from Kent. And it was like not even 15 minutes away at a English bar. And my mom's like, go, you'll have a good time. Don't worry about it. And I was dreading it, dreading my mind. It's like, go, just go, go. And I went. And I had the time of my life. I met people. I ate good food.
Yeah.
I met a woman I knew who I was talking to a lot, who ran the alumni association. And I just had a good old time.
Hmm.
And I came back home with a smile on my face. My mom's like, see, I told you you'd have a good time. And the
Yeah.
same thing happened when I went away for a podcasting conference. The week built up to me flying out, I was a mess.
Hmm.
I kept thinking I wanted to cancel, I wanted to cancel, I wanted to cancel. My mom's like, go. And I remember hopping in the Uber and I was crying a little bit.
Hmm.
And then the Uber driver just made me smile and I forgot everything else. By the time I got to the airport and into where I was going, I was a completely different person and I enjoyed myself.
Hmm. It's overcoming the barrier, isn't it? That's there. It's
Yeah.
invisible barrier to anybody else, but to us, it's huge, and it's trying to overcome that is. And I think unless I have safety things that are going to help me there, I don't know whether it's even transport, even doing things that make the adjustments that we need to just make things feel smooth. I don't know. It's just tricky, isn't it? And I kick myself because there's so many things that I know I would have enjoyed going to, but I just
Mhm.
can't. And I wish that, yeah, I wish that I didn't avoid things so much in life because I think there is so much more to enjoy if I could actually get out there and do it. But I mean, it's a bit different now because I'm the fact that I'm caring full time for my children, so that's a bit different. But even without that, even if I took myself back to uni days, I was very regimented on how I would go out, and I would only go out once a week because I couldn't cope with it, really. That's the truth of it. I used to like more the fact that I'd be in my room and cope with what sort of things I was doing, not, or I'd go to the gym or I'd do different things that I enjoyed doing because I'd cope with that. I couldn't go out every night like the others did. And I don't know why I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. It took probably the social come down of going out was long enough to recover from
I mean,
the uncertainty of the unknown.
that was me in uni. I mean, it I would stay in my room. Only time I would go out is with my when I had my society meeting.
Hmm.
I would go to them. I would go out with my friends, but to go out on my own and explore, I would rarely do that. The only time I would do that is if I needed to go into town for something, if I wanted to explore a little. But other than that, never use the library.
Hmm.
Stayed in my room. I was in bed, but I was in my room by 6 o'clock when everyone else was still out. I just stayed within my own comforts.
Hmm. Because
But
it feels
yet,
safe.
I mean,
Hmm.
but yet I am a big proponent on stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, I've written a book about it. I'm in the process of getting that edited and stuff. I mean, for us to step out of our comfort zone, I know it's hard because we're so used to everything that we're comfortable with.
Yeah. And it is definitely hard to push out of that level. I can also relate in because I've done the children's book and the adult like the adult novel, which just got launched this summer, and I had a big book launch for it, but trying to manage doing that was so hard, and it took weeks and weeks to build up and then to recover from because it felt like such a big, it was a struggle really. And I think, yeah, we do have to come out of our safe zone. And the thing is, it's hard because a lot of people would think that often, you're doing a podcast or maybe the kind of work I'm doing. Sometimes we seem confident or we are able, we're quite outgoing, but there's a real hidden shyness that's underneath that, isn't it? I don't know if somebody said it was extroverted introvert or the other way around, but which we are, aren't we? We're kind of there, we're at odds with
An
ourselves even.
ambivert.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I am. I like going out, but yet I like the comforts of my own home where I can recharge and
hmm
there's not a lot of noise going on where it's quiet and calming.
hmm Um, Actually, when I said to you the like that social come down, I wrote a whole chapter in my book called The Social Come Down for the character because for context, I'll just explain. The book's called Black Rainbow, so it's about a woman who's married with two children. So she's undiagnosed, etc., and she's just managing a situation where on the surface, everything should be ticking along okay. You know, she seemed like she should have it all, but underneath, things are crumbling bit by bit, which starts really from the fact that she's got a child who is struggling to be
Mhm.
understood. So she has to start to look at that. But what she does then is starts to question her own understanding, her own response system to things. So she's naturally a people pleaser, or and so one of the things that she does quite early on is goes to a christening with the family and trying to keep up with how the family and society expectations of her as a parent and as a woman then impact her. So afterwards, she has the whole chapter, which is a social come down, because that's what happens, isn't it? We become completely wiped out after doing something that one, that we enjoy, but two, that might be every day to most people that wouldn't affect them in the same kind of way. And then, yeah, and then as the book goes on, it kind of, she starts to then question a lot of herself and who she is, so much like we were saying, those kind of guests that you've got and how I've experienced it myself, like that kind of, you start to question yourself and think, oh, actually they're only like this, but I'm like that, what does that mean? And trying to learn to be authentic as yourself is quite a hard thing to do, and that's what I've tried to do in a fictional way, so I'm hoping that it will have an impact on people when they read it. But that's, yeah. And but then also I've tied in the PDA part, but it doesn't necessarily, it would be a story that could be relevant to other neurodivergent presentations. It could be ADHD, it could be that you're autistic in another presentation. It's not really about that. It's about learning how we are as people and how do we break away from what we're expected to be when that doesn't really sit with us as people. Um, there's never really a clear answer on that, is there? But that's, yeah, that's what I've kind of written about. So
So, do you have any sensory issues?
I do, yeah, huge. Mainly around touch and sound, smell and stuff. I don't really like noisy places either. So yeah, I do. And I think I avoid places and avoid doing things. I have a really random one, which is not like, you say sensory, and then I feel like, oh God, don't say it, don't say it. And then it's really embarrassing. But I have a real bad aversion to cardboard or paper or anything like that. So I can't even cope with someone ripping a piece of paper or opening an envelope. If I touch cardboard, I get goose pimples everywhere. It's just like as a shudder. If I was to accidentally touch something wooden on my mouth or my lips, like a lollipop stick or a wooden piece of cutlery, I get goose pimples everywhere. It's just really uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But then equally, I seek out materials. I've always comforted myself with touching bobbly materials. So it's like I can deal with certain textures, but others I have a real avoidance to. How about you?
I am hypersensitive to sound and smell.
hmm
Like, I can hear my mother's phone ringing in her purse in the loud room. Loud noises really bother me. Like, we have this neighbor next door on the second floor. Every morning they will start cooking and turn on their kitchen exhaust, and it will be loud enough that it bothers me.
hmm And it's hard to tune it out, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can't tune it out. I have put up foam in the window and that doesn't work, and
Mm.
so it kind of ruins my sleep in the morning.
I
Um, I also have tinnitus, which is hard at times. I'll get like a really high pitch ringing in my ear. for maybe like 2, 3 minutes, and then it'll start to fade away. Smell is pretty hard for me. Like if I go anywhere and someone's smoking pot, that's really strong. It makes me want to gag.
I'm even gagging now at the thought of it. Oh.
I remember I was in England and I was out with a bunch of friends and I smelled someone smoking pot and I go to her, I smell a skunk, and she goes to me, do you mean the animal or do you mean the animal or do you mean as in the drug? I'm like, the animal. She's like, no, we don't have skunks out here in England. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, it's horrible, isn't it? When you have a really strong, I know my children, there's that each of them have different sensory profiles. So for some, like my older daughter cannot tolerate most noise, and it is really it's really unbearable. So if we're in a house, like if my dad was in here, she feels like the floorboards are reverberating just because he's talking, and we have to shut down everything. She has so many different devices in her room just to tune out the noise for the like she has two different fans, an Alexa that plays water music all the time. She'll do anything and she still can't tolerate any of the other noises. So but whereas me and my youngest, we've got more of the aversion to like sudden sharp or loud noises that are very, like unpredictable. So I cannot I will always cover my ears before a balloon, so anyone touches a balloon, a cork pop in or anything like that. I can't cope with it. It just sends my panic station. But and she's always never coped when she was younger. She never used to cope with like cars going past or so yeah, they do it. Thing is, isn't it? It's strange because to someone else they'd think, well, we should just get on with it or
Mhm.
just get used to it, tolerate it, and whatever. But unless you're living with that, it's very difficult. I have a funny story about my eldest daughter. When she went to a primary school for a stage that she could actually manage, there was a day that she walked into the building and there was two floors to this building and so many different classrooms, and she just walked in the building in the reception, and bearing in mind these are like great big double doors that you've got to get through. She walked into the reception and she said, I can smell, I think she said candy. I can smell candy. I can smell candy. And everyone was looking around thinking, what on earth is she talking about? And she was so intent. Once they opened the double door, she went hunting across the building and she went all along the corridors, up the stairs, across another corridor, led them to a room. And in that room was some chocolate Easter eggs that she must have smelt when she walked into the and they were all packaged up. So like that shows you what heightened sense of smell that she's
Wow,
got. Yeah, like and so then so when someone says to you, well, you just have to get on with that smell,
that's
they
tough.
don't know what that's like, do they? Because that's tough. How could you smell that? Like, it's crazy, isn't it?
I mean,
How
I
do
got
they?
a good friend who got a heightened sense of taste where he can't just drink any bottled water. He can taste the minerals in it. Where he doesn't like mayonnaise because he can taste the vinegar in it.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's tough.
Yeah, it's so strong, isn't it? You can't even begin to imagine. But I think it's interesting because we have it in different areas, don't we? Not everyone will have it the same way, and even within families, we have the same genetic makeup and all look differently. Sorry about my dog. Interrupted by the dog.
Not a problem.
Could
So
hear.
do you have any special interests?
Um, well, the current interest is learning about autism and ADHD. And I probably do that far too much. Other than that, special interests, I like films and I like I'm trying to think really, theatre shows, that kind of stuff. But I mean, I feel like at the moment for the last few years since I've discovered about autism, that's all I kind of look at. It's kind of takes over all of my conversations, who I talk to, what I do, what I research. How about you?
Um, my special interests are all over. I mean, computers, artificial intelligence, um, amateur radio.
Wow.
So they scatter. I mean, I find something new every time. So
Hmm. And interests can come and go, can't they? You
Yeah,
know, sometimes.
that's the tough thing is you'll get
Mm,
into it and all of a sudden you'll start lose interest in it.
mhm. Yeah.
Now, here's something we didn't talk about. I know you talk about this, is what is parent blaming?
Yeah. Well, in essence, it's when literally when a parent does get blamed for in this respect, it's around neurodivergent families being blamed for the child's or the individual's presentation because there's a lack of understanding about what it might mean in the world of disabilities, really. Like, what does that look like? How, you know, particularly when that's confounded by misinformation or a lack of knowledge around what it might look like. So yeah, so parents get blamed here in our country, and I do know that a lot of American parents get it too, is that we kind of get blamed for things that we we're often family profiled, and it goes on a lot of bias, really. So I've faced parent blame. One, because the fact that I'm having to use different strategies with my children, which are not typically seen as the norm, and which allow for more autonomy for my children because that's the kind of nature of their disabilities. And to the outside eye, doing something different instantly kind of puts a radar in that you're doing something wrong. So there's a first ammunition that I could possibly be blamed for my children, in effect, that I'm weak, or that there's a reason that I'm not doing something correctly, which is making them present in the way that they are. But then other areas of family profiling can happen. So I did a body of research with another autistic writer, and we're both single parents, both separated from our partners. And we have both faced fabricated and induced illness allegations. So that's called FII, F-I-I, which is kind of replaced. Do you ever hear of like Munchausen by proxy, where the parents kind of blamed for creating this illness when it's not really there, basically,
Yeah,
or a condition? Yeah.
you
So
create a
we,
fake illness.
yeah, and we were both accused of that quite significantly with child, you know, for me, it was dangling of child protection. She's also faced her own kind of situations. And as we've both been parent blamed, we put on a body of research. So we had over 1,000 people that responded to us as parents, of PDA parents, and the statistics were incredible. There was like over 87.8% that had been felt blamed for the child's presentation. And then the statistics were extremely high around family profiling. So we were seeing such differences. You know, so quite often single parents, single mothers are often blamed for the way that the child is, because they assume that there's a reason behind it. Sadly, people with ethnic minorities are often blamed and assumed, and there's not often a fair handling of the situation, of what access of support that they can get. If you're neurodivergent, because your communication style is slightly different, there you become instantly kind of picked as and blamed, really. So there are a whole host of reasons why we get blamed. But underneath it really lies a lack of understanding about what it might mean to be neurodivergent and how that plays out. So is something that's kind of haunted me quite a lot. So this is where it's really madness, because in one way I've been in positions where I've been asked to stand up on a conference and speak to 350 delegates about PDA and about kind of be an expert talker on a subject. And yet at the same time, exactly the same afternoon that was happening, a great big meeting was happening about me, my own family, and it had been set up secretly so that I wasn't allowed to be part of it. So I wasn't allowed to contribute my voice to the situation of my own family's needs. And I was, by being excluded and not at that table, yeah, my voice was eradicated. I also have to be quite clear, that's actually what started me writing my own book, because I had to shut down my own social media platforms, my blog, etc., because I was under so much fire and heat from services who were trying to find us any evidence they could to prove that I was fabricating the disabilities in my children, that they were following me everywhere. Everything was getting recorded. My own social media was being targeted. And it was incredibly traumatic as a period of time. And when I asked for support for the children, I was being dangled with child protection. So I had no other way to be able to be speaking clearly, because anything I said was a red flag and would also be documented. Hence the reason I started pouring my heart into a book about a woman who didn't have a voice, who starts to find a way to find her voice, because it was very relevant to me, really, at that time. But that's, I know I've got a long-winded way of saying it, but that's what parent blame is kind of what we're seeing a lot in our community, really.
All right. Now, have you found out what your kids' special interests are?
Oh my goodness, there's quite a few and they vary. So one of my children describes herself or identifies herself as a Therian, and she really loves animals. She feels like she is an animal. So she enjoys mask making, creating animal masks and tails, and doing, I think she calls them quadrobics, where she kind of works on stuff like that. I mean, she has other interests as well, but that's something that she really enjoys doing. My other children like Roblox and playing kind of games. They like video editing. They like programs, and it depends what interest they're in. So they'll get heavily involved in an interest. At the moment, that's the current interest is the Vampire Diaries. I'm thinking of what other things there are. They sometimes they move so quick. Pets and animals are often amongst all three of them. They really enjoy those. So it just depends really. Like they kind of go full immersed into one particular interest, and then they move on to new ones. And I can't catch up.
Now, do you find it easier to see things through your kids' eyes because that you're both autistic?
Yeah, I think I do, probably. I think I definitely have more empathy for what their challenges might be. I think that's probably where I've kind of understood them a bit more. I think because I can imagine what it's like for them. So even if it's, say, if it was a sensory need, it might not be the same one that I have, but I can imagine how that feels. So, for instance, one of them finds like brushing her teeth is so hard, and she has to work so hard to make sure she gets that done every single day, because it's like, I think I heard of one phrase of it, like a sensory kryptonite. It's like, what is that makes it really uncomfortable to you? And she's like, imagine brushing your teeth, Mum, with cardboard, because she knows exactly what, like I pass it to them if there's a cardboard or something to open, because I just know that instantly I shudder, because the feeling of it just makes me feel sick. And she's like, imagine having to do that, because it's such a necessity to keep your teeth really clean and healthy, but you've got to brush it with cardboard. So it's quite a good analogy, isn't it, to me, so that I can understand how she feels, because it's something different. So she's not just choosing to avoid, she's not choosing to be lazy or not to be motivated to brush her teeth. It's like she can't, and that's so tricky. So because I have that information, I can work around it and find different ways. So sometimes I might have, for a stage, I bought one of those like radar things where you can put a bit of toothpaste on it and it kind of almost vibrates to try and clean them. Mm-hmm. We use mouthwash lots. Sometimes I will bring her a jug of water and the toothbrush and the toothpaste on it, and she will do it while she's distracted on something else, so that it minimizes some of that input. And once she's actually started it, then she'll just set her timer or something and do it. So it's almost like looking at all different aspects to try and make it easier for your child. And I think the fact that I'm autistic myself, I can understand it in a different way. And I think, I can look at it and not see that my child's trying, they're not making it up. There is actually a need there. And I think to meet those needs, you're understanding it. So, yeah, I think I do.
And what advice do you have for those who are finding out they have PDA or autistic or both?
Um, I think you've kind of got to let go of any unsolicited opinions, even be that from your own family or friends, because sometimes not everybody understands in the way that they might need to, and they might think that they're helping, but that doesn't always work out. I think I personally think trying to connect in an autistic community and listening to a range of voices, sometimes being led by not led by your own child or yourself, but also hearing other voices, being willing to take on different points of view, that kind of helps you kind of further your own understanding on what it might mean. And sometimes, yeah, like connecting to communities definitely does make a difference. I think like I can remember when I reached out at the very beginning when I was in a position where, my eldest daughter was struggling with school and we were in a really terrible place. And by reaching out and asking out into questions into the community, I suddenly started to make one connection of somebody that said, I'll come along to a meeting with you and I'll help you. Or even, you know, just giving me some support there and then just listening to me. Yeah, I know it's tough. It is, what you're doing is really challenging and stuff. And then I felt a bit better. I felt more connected, more validated. And I think our knowledge improves and yeah, finding those people that can actually help. I mean, if you're looking at PDA as a potential profile, I would definitely advise doing some research online just to see if that definitely fits. Like the PDA Society is always usually the first place we would go, but there's lots of other writers out there that are really covering it from different angles. And I think, yeah, trying to find those people that might have some answers that start to unlock your own understanding on things. I think that's
All right,
quite a
and
good way.
finally, where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Um, so my blog is www.pdaparenting.com. I have like some resources and stuff like that on there. My two books, Black Rainbow and I'm Not Upside Down, I'm Downside Up, not a boring book about PDA. They're both available on Amazon. And if it's mainly in the States and stuff, they're both available over there on Amazon. And then if anyone wants to sort of come and join me, I do generally speak on social media quite a lot. So I'm on Instagram, X, and Facebook a lot.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Danielle Jata-Hall, and I'll see you in the next one. See you there, everyone. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you. Bye.